Why is it that some people seem to move through life untouched, as if nothing has the power to disturb their inner balance? They face setbacks at work, but don't crumble. They encounter disrespect, but don't lose their cool. Life throws curveballs, yet they walk forward with steady steps, calm and unshaken. Meanwhile, many of us can find our day ruined by something as small as a delayed text message, a rude driver on the road, or a careless comment online. Suddenly our mood spirals, our thoughts spin endlessly, and we convince ourselves that the world has wronged us. But here's the paradox. The world didn't take your peace. You handed it over. This is where the ancient Stoics enter the conversation. Their wisdom speaks louder today than ever. It is not external events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. The greatest source of suffering is not what happens, but the meaning we attach to it. That small, invisible space between what occurs and how we respond, that is where freedom lives. Once you realize that, once you train yourself to pause before reacting, you begin to reclaim authority over your own life. And this isn't just philosophy tucked away in old books. It is psychology before psychology existed, a roadmap for living in a world designed to trigger you at every turn. From social media platforms that profit from your outrage, to workplaces where politics and comparison thrive, to personal relationships where people knowingly or unknowingly press your emotional buttons, modern life is full of traps that make you reactive. But you don't have to play that game anymore. Here at StoicCraft, we explore how the timeless insights of Stoicism connect directly with today's challenges, whether it's navigating a stressful job, protecting your peace and relationships, or resisting the constant noise of digital culture. If you're between the ages of 35 and 45, you already know life isn't getting easier. Responsibilities multiply, expectations grow heavier, and the margin for emotional chaos becomes thinner. That's why learning the Stoic way of emotional mastery isn't just interesting, it's essential in this journey. You'll learn why your triggers are not weaknesses, but signals, how silence can be more powerful than words, how detachment is not coldness but discipline, and how reclaiming your mind can set you free from manipulation. Most importantly, you'll see how small daily shifts, choosing calm over chaos, clarity over confusion, can transform the way you experience everything. Because when no one can trigger you, you don't just survive life, you master it. Most of us walk around convinced that other people and outside events hold the keys to our emotions. We say things like, "He made me feel stupid," or "that ruined my whole day." On the surface, it feels true. Someone says something cutting, and suddenly anger rushes in. A colleague overlooks your contribution at work, and bitterness simmers for hours. But pause for a moment. Did that person really make you feel that way? Or did your mind assign meaning to their words and then spiral into reaction? The uncomfortable truth is that no one can make you feel anything without your consent. What hurts is rarely the event itself, it's the story you attach to it. The Stoics were crystal clear on this. It is not things that upset us, but our judgments about those things. This was their way of saying that emotions are interpretations, not inevitabilities. Imagine being at the gym and noticing someone frown in your direction. Instantly, your brain leaps into action. Are they judging me? Is it how I look? Am I doing this wrong? Within seconds, you've built a whole narrative that leaves you feeling small and self-conscious. Yet maybe that person was having a bad day. Maybe they weren't even looking at you. The spiral was born inside your own head, not in reality. By the time we reach our mid-30s and 40s, these narratives often grow heavier. Past heartbreaks, workplace rejections, and accumulated disappointments shape the lens we carry into each new moment. If you've been betrayed in love, you might approach every new relationship with suspicion. If you've been criticized harshly, you might hear judgment even in neutral feedback. It's like trying to navigate life with a cracked windshield. You think you're seeing reality, but really you're looking through distortions. And here lies the illusion. Because we never learned to question this lens, we mistake our reactions for truth. We believe the outside world is in charge of our peace. But it's not. The world can poke, provoke, or press, but it is you who decides whether to hand over control. Every time you automatically react, you reinforce the belief that you're powerless, when in fact you're not. Your power begins the moment you pause, the moment you notice the story forming in your head and ask, is this really about them, or is it about me? This shift doesn't happen overnight, but it begins with awareness. And once you start to see clearly, the illusion of emotional slavery begins to dissolve. You realize that the leash others seem to hold was actually tied around your own neck, and you're the only one who can take it off. The way we experience the world is rarely direct. What we call reality is filtered through years of memory, pain, and conditioning. Imagine wearing glasses with cracked lenses. You can still walk, but everything looks distorted. That's how most of us live emotionally. We think we're responding to the present moment, but in truth, we're responding to old wounds projected onto new situations. Take relationships, for example. By the time you reach your mid-30s or 40s, you've probably experienced heartbreak, disappointment, or betrayal. These experiences don't simply disappear. They leave impressions that color how you interpret love and trust. A partner comes home late, and instead of simply noticing the fact, your mind reaches back to old fears. What if they're lying? What if this is the beginning of the end? The event itself is neutral. The story layered on top is not. Or consider the workplace. A colleague gives you constructive feedback, but your cracked lens transforms it into criticism. Instead of hearing, here's how you can improve, you hear, you're not good enough. The Stoics would remind us that it's not the colleagues' words that wound you, it's the judgment you've allowed to take root inside. And when that judgment has been reinforced by years of insecurity or rejection, it becomes automatic, almost invisible. This is why Socrates insisted that the unexamined life is not worth living. He wasn't speaking of philosophy as an academic pursuit, but of the necessity to examine the very lens through which we perceive life. Without that self-examination, we live trapped in reaction, convinced that every glance, every tone, every silence is personal. But the truth is, most of it isn't about you at all. People carry their own storms, their own cracked lenses. What you interpret as judgment might simply be the shadow of their private struggle. The challenge is that no one teaches us this while we're growing up. We're taught arithmetic, grammar, and history, but almost never how to question our interpretations. And so we internalize the idea that feelings are direct responses to reality, not layered responses to perception. By adulthood, this becomes a dangerous illusion, because if you don't question the lens, You'll never recognize how much of your suffering is self-made. Here's the invitation. Pause and ask yourself, am I seeing this moment clearly or through the fog of my past? That single question can begin to clear the glass. It's not about denying what you feel, but about recognizing that feelings are not facts. And when you remember that distinction, the grip of your old stories begins to loosen, and space for peace begins to open. Between what happens to you and how you respond lies a fraction of a second. To most people, that space feels invisible, almost non-existent. Something happens, someone insults you, a colleague undermines you, your child snaps back, and before you even realize it, you're already reacting. Anger rises, defensiveness takes over, or shame locks you in silence. It feels automatic, as if your emotions are in the driver's seat. But the Stoics discovered a truth that modern psychology confirms. Within that tiny space is the power to choose. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who endured the horrors of concentration camps, later wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." That insight echoes Stoicism word for word. You can't always control the stimulus, what people say, what life throws at you, but you can always train yourself to notice the space before reaction. That noticing is where mastery begins. Picture this in a workplace setting. Your boss criticizes a project you worked hard on. The old program kicks in. They don't value me. I'm failing. I need to defend myself right now. But if you've trained the pause, you catch yourself. Instead of snapping back or shutting down, you breathe. You ask internally, is this feedback or an attack? Is this about me or about the standards of the work? That one breath interrupts the old script. It gives you the clarity to respond thoughtfully, rather than react impulsively or consider family life. A spouse makes a sarcastic remark, and your first instinct is to escalate. Yet in the pause, you realize the remark may come from their own stress, not from malice. You choose not to fuel the fire, and the conflict dissolves before it begins. This isn't suppression. It's selection. You're not denying the feeling. You're choosing whether the feeling deserves a stage. Aristotle captured it perfectly. Anyone can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy. Emotional intelligence is not about never feeling. It's about navigating the pause so your feelings serve you instead of sabotage you. The more you practice this, the stronger the pause becomes. At first it feels awkward, like retraining a muscle. But over time it becomes second nature. That pause is where composure is forged, where self-respect is reclaimed, and where you transform from a puppet of triggers into the quiet master of your own mind. If you've ever felt like the world is conspiring to keep you on edge, you're not wrong. Modern society is carefully engineered to hijack your emotions. From the endless scroll of social media feeds to the marketing campaigns flashing across every screen, the system thrives on your reactivity. Calmness doesn't make money. Outrage does. Stillness doesn't keep you glued to a screen. Comparison does. And so you live inside a world that constantly whispers, react now. Don't think. Don't pause. Feel threatened, feel envious, feel behind. Social media is one of the clearest examples. Algorithms are not neutral. They're designed to reward conflict and amplify extremes. Why? Because when you're angry, offended, or anxious, you stay engaged longer. A rude comment hooks you more than a kind one. A controversial post spreads faster than a thoughtful reflection. Before you know it, you've surrendered hours of your day and much of your peace, not because of reality, but because of engineered provocation. Marketing plays a similar game. Entire industries profit from convincing you that you're lacking. You're too old, too young, too quiet, too loud, too behind. But good news. For a price, you can buy your way out of insecurity. The more reactive you are to these messages, the more predictable and profitable you become. Marcus Aurelius warned centuries ago, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." Yet here we are, chasing likes, shares, and external validation as though they determine our worth. By the time you're in your late 30s or 40s, this cycle often feels exhausting. You scroll, you compare, and suddenly you feel behind in life. You consume endless media only to feel emptier. It's not weakness, it's design. The system is built to keep you distracted from your own soul. As Carl Jung observed, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. What better way to avoid yourself than drowning in everyone else's drama, outrage, and opinions? But here's the shift. Once you see the system, you stop being its puppet. You begin to recognize when you're being baited, when outrage is being sold to you as entertainment, when comparison is being weaponized to drain your energy. And with that recognition comes power. You don't have to stop using social media or walk away from the modern world entirely. You simply learn to step back, to consume without being consumed, to use the tools without being used by them. If society at large profits from your reactivity, personal relationships often survive on it. Some of the people closest to you may, knowingly or unknowingly, learn exactly which buttons to provoke a response. In toxic dynamics, this becomes a form of power. The more emotionally reactive you are, the easier you are to manipulate. Once someone discovers that a certain word, tone, or gesture sets you off, they can control you with frightening ease. Picture it like a control panel strapped to your chest. Each button is labeled insecurity, anger, jealousy, guilt, fear. Everyone around you eventually learns, consciously or not, how to push those buttons. A partner hints at an old wound, and suddenly you're spiraling. A colleague questions your competence, and you overreact in a way that undermines your credibility. A family member guilt trips you, and you cave even though it goes against your own values. When your emotions are on display for anyone to press, your freedom isn't really yours, it belongs to whoever knows your weak spots. This is a hard truth to face, especially in midlife when relationships carry more weight: marriages, parenting, long-term friendships, professional networks. At this stage, emotional reactivity doesn't just cost you a moment of peace. It can damage reputations, strain marriages, and create long shadows for your children to absorb. The stakes are higher, which makes Stoic wisdom even more relevant. The Stoics taught that mastery begins with self-rule. Socrates once said, "He who is not a good servant will not be a good master." If you can't govern your own reactions, How can you expect to govern your relationships, your household, or your career? Self-mastery is not about suppressing feelings. It's about unplugging the control panel so no one else has the power to push your buttons. Imagine someone hurling an insult, and instead of exploding, you simply don't react, not because you're numb, but because you're free. That freedom is rare, and it commands respect. And here's the paradox. When you stop reacting predictably, manipulators lose interest. Toxic dynamics thrive on your energy, but when you starve them of it, they weaken. You no longer provide the fuel that keeps the cycle alive. What once felt like constant tension now begins to dissolve. In its place, you reclaim presence, dignity, and clarity. This isn't about becoming distant. It's about refusing to let others treat your inner world as if it belongs to them. In a world addicted to noise, silence is often mistaken for weakness. People assume that if you don't respond immediately, you must not have an answer. If you don't clap back in the moment, you must be afraid. But the Stoics saw silence differently. They saw it as a form of power, a conscious pause that creates space for wisdom. When you choose silence, you are not surrendering. You are observing. You are giving yourself the time to see clearly before you act. Think about walking into a tense meeting at work. Voices are raised, people are defensive, and the air feels heavy. The younger version of you might have soaked up that tension, adding fuel to the fire with your own irritation. But imagine the wiser version of you, one shaped by Stoic practice. You notice the tension without absorbing it. You acknowledge what's happening, but you don't make it yours. By staying silent for a moment, you allow yourself to observe what others cannot see. Who is driven by ego? Who is masking insecurity? Who is seeking resolution? Silence sharpens perception. This extends beyond the workplace. In relationships, silence can diffuse conflict faster than words. A sarcastic remark or a passive-aggressive jab often demands a reaction. That's the bait. But when you hold silence not from fear, but from strength, you deny the drama its fuel. You send an unspoken message. My peace is not up for grabs. That kind of silence isn't coldness. It's discipline. It's you choosing not to dance to the rhythm of chaos. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. The pause, the silence, is your chance to revoke. You may not control what others say, but you always control whether their words enter your inner world. And here's the beauty. Silence doesn't just protect you. It unsettles those who rely on your reactions. People who thrive on conflict expect you to fight back. When you don't, when you hold your center, they're forced to confront their own noise without your participation. That is how silence disarms. That is how observation wins battles words never could. One of the most misunderstood ideas in Stoicism is detachment. People often hear the word and imagine coldness, indifference, or shutting down emotionally. But that's not what the Stoics taught. They spoke of apatheia, a state not of apathy, but of inner calm, where the soul remains untouched by chaos. It's the ability to engage with life fully while refusing to be ruled by every storm that passes through it. Picture yourself as a tree standing in the middle of a strong wind. The branches sway, the air howls, but the roots stay firm. Detachment works the same way. The noise of life moves around you, not through you. You see what's happening, you feel the presence of tension or conflict, but you don't bend to it. This doesn't mean you care less. It means you care correctly. You preserve your energy for what matters instead of letting it leak into every passing irritation by midlife. This practice becomes especially valuable. At 35 or 45, you carry heavier responsibilities: family, career, finances, aging parents. You can't afford to waste emotional energy on every slight, every rumor, or every provocation. Detachment ensures that you don't. It teaches you to distinguish between what deserves your attention and what doesn't. Instead of being pulled into every argument, you learn to ask, is this truly my battle or just noise? Consider a workplace example. A colleague tries to provoke you with a dismissive comment. Old you would have fired back, proving your worth, wasting energy. But the detached version of you doesn't bite. You recognize the tactic, see the insecurity behind it, and simply move on. That's not weakness. That's strength. It's clarity in action. Aristotle once said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Detachment begins here. When you know who you are, you stop needing to prove it to everyone else. You're not swayed by every opinion or controlled by every criticism. You remain steady, rooted, present. And yes, some may call you cold for protecting your energy. Let them. What they don't understand is that detachment is not the absence of emotion. It's the mastery of it. True detachment doesn't disconnect you from life. It connects you to it more deeply because you finally stop wasting yourself on shadows. You become free to give your best to what actually matters, your purpose, your relationships, your growth. And in a noisy world, that kind of selective focus is not just wise, it's revolutionary. Drama survives on one thing: your attention. Gossip spreads only when people take the bait. Arguments escalate only when both sides keep fueling the fire. Toxic individuals thrive only when they succeed in dragging you into their chaos. The Stoics understood this long before the modern world gave us endless platforms to argue and perform. If you refuse to feed the drama, it starves, and eventually it dies. This doesn't mean avoiding conflict at all costs. Life demands courage. There will be times when you must speak truth, defend values, or set firm boundaries. But most of the noise that demands your reaction isn't worth the energy. A sarcastic comment from a coworker, a passive-aggressive text from a friend, or an online stranger trying to provoke you, these are traps designed to pull you in. The moment you engage, you hand over your peace. The moment you withhold attention, you keep your power. Aristotle offered a timeless warning. To avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. But Stoicism takes a different angle. You don't remain silent for approval. You remain silent for strength. Silence is not about hiding. It's about refusing to waste energy on nonsense. When you disengage from drama, you're not weak. You're disciplined. You've recognized that not every spark deserves a fire by your mid-30s and 40s. This lesson becomes urgent. The weight of responsibilities, family, work, financial security means you cannot afford to bleed energy on meaningless disputes. Every ounce of energy spent defending yourself against petty attacks is energy stolen from what matters most. The people who truly master life aren't the loudest, the angriest, or the most dramatic. They are the ones who can look at provocation and calmly walk away. This approach unsettles people who expect you to react. Drama requires participants, and when you refuse to join, the stage goes dark. It leaves others exposed to their own noise, forcing them to deal with it without your contribution. And while the world often rewards those who shout the loudest, that reward is shallow, a quick sugar rush of attention that fades as quickly as it arrives. The deeper reward belongs to those who choose substance over spectacle. Socrates taught that self-control is the foundation of wisdom. Each time you resist the urge to fuel drama, you strengthen that foundation. You move closer to the version of yourself that no longer needs to defend every detail or prove every point. And in that restraint, you gain something priceless, a peace no one can take from you. Most of us don't realize that we're running on emotional autopilot. From childhood, we've been conditioned with scripts we didn't write. Stress hits, and the script says, panic. Someone criticizes us, and the script says, defend yourself. We fail at something, and the script says, spiral into shame. These reactions feel natural only because they're familiar. They are not destiny. They're programming. And programming can be rewritten. The Stoics anticipated this long before psychology gave it a name. They taught that repeated practice shapes the mind, just as repeated exercise shapes the body. Every time you interrupt an old pattern, you carve a new path in the brain. At first, it feels unnatural, even awkward. But with repetition, the new script strengthens. Eventually, calm becomes your default, not chaos. Consider a stressful situation. A deadline looms, tension builds, and your old pattern would be frantic scrambling. Instead, you pause. You breathe. You remind yourself, stress is not the event, it's my response to it. In that breath, you reprogram the script. Or take criticism. Someone points out a flaw, and instead of rushing to justify, you smile. Not because you don't care, but because you're no longer owned by the need for approval. Each small choice rewrites the code. Carl Jung once observed, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And that's exactly what reprogramming requires. When you accept yourself fully, criticism loses its power. You're no longer scrambling to defend an identity you've already embraced. The insults don't land because there's no unhealed wound for them to pierce. What used to trigger you becomes fuel for clarity. For people in their 30s and 40s, this practice is transformative. By this stage, life has already tested you with enough stress, criticism, and failure to fill a library. Without reprogramming, you repeat the same cycles, endlessly burnout after stress, defensiveness after critique, despair after setbacks. But with reprogramming, you step out of the loop. You create space for new responses. Presence instead of panic, peace instead of rage, growth instead of collapse. Reprogramming is not about becoming numb. It's about becoming free. It's about realizing that you can choose a different ending to the same story. Over time, your mind learns. We don't panic anymore. We don't take the bait. We don't waste energy on drama. We breathe, we see clearly, we act with intention. That is the essence of Stoic training, a daily rewiring of the mind, until freedom becomes second nature. Every emotion you feel is tied to a story you're telling yourself. If you see yourself as a victim, pain becomes the dominant theme. If you cast yourself as the villain, shame follows you everywhere. But if you choose to see yourself as the hero of your own story, everything changes. Setbacks become plot twists, insults become fuel, and struggles become chapters in your rise. The facts of your life may not change, but the frame through which you view them absolutely can. Modern psychology calls this the framing effect, the way your perspective shapes your reality. The Stoics knew it centuries earlier. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." Conquering yourself begins with taking authorship of the story you tell about your life. Most people live as if someone else is holding the pen. They let critics, disappointments, and cultural messages write their narrative. They hand over the script, then wonder why they feel trapped. Reclaiming authorship means pausing to ask, what frame am I using right now? Imagine losing a job. Through one frame, it's disaster. Proof you're not good enough, a reason to spiral into despair. Through another frame, it's opportunity. A chance to realign with your values, to grow, to move towards something better. Same event, different story. Radically different emotional outcome. By midlife, the need to rewrite your story becomes even clearer. You've lived long enough to accumulate regrets, disappointments, even failures. If you keep replaying them as tragedies, they weigh you down like anchors. But if you choose to frame them as training, as the exact experiences that equip you with wisdom, you free yourself. Your scars stop being symbols of defeat and start becoming evidence of resilience. The power here is subtle but immense. You don't need to invent fantasies or deny reality. You simply acknowledge that reality alone doesn't dictate your life, interpretation does. When you shift the frame, you shift the meaning, and when you shift the meaning, you shift how you feel. That is emotional sovereignty. This is not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about choosing which lens will serve you best. Do you carry the story that weakens you or the one that strengthens you? Do you live as the victim of life or the hero of your own journey? The Stoics challenge us to choose wisely, because in that choice lies the difference between being crushed by life and being shaped by it. There's a unique kind of power that doesn't come from shouting louder or striking back harder. It comes from refusing to be moved. When someone tries to insult you, their goal is simple: to get a reaction. They want to see you flinch, defend, explode, or shrink. The moment you do, they've won. But when you stay calm, when you meet their energy with quiet steadiness, you unplug their power source. The insult falls flat, leaving them more unsettled than you. Think about a workplace bully. They expect you to argue, to justify yourself, to get rattled. Instead, you look them in the eye and calmly say, "I'll consider that," and move on. No fireworks, no drama, just composure. Or picture an online troll typing furiously to provoke you. Rather than firing back, you simply don't respond. Silence, in this case, is louder than words. What they thought would pull you down only reveals their own emptiness. This doesn't mean you allow mistreatment. Stoicism is not passivity. It's strategic restraint. You choose your battles, and you fight only when it serves a greater purpose. You don't waste your energy proving your worth to those determined not to see it. Instead, you redirect that energy into growth, into purpose, into relationships that deserve it. There's also a surprising twist. Sometimes you can deflect insults not by ignoring them, but by turning them into nothing. Someone says, "You're too quiet." You respond, "Yes, I like my peace." They sneer, "You don't care, do you?" You reply, "Not about things that don't matter." What was meant to sting becomes disarmed, transformed into proof of your clarity. This isn't sarcasm. It's self-possession. The Stoics believed the mind deserved as much training as the body. Socrates himself reminded us that it is a shame to grow old without seeing the strength your body is capable of. The same applies to your emotions. Why go through life without training them? Why let every provocation hijack your peace when you can learn to hold steady? By midlife, this becomes one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. You've faced enough arguments, criticisms, and conflicts to know that most of them don't deserve your energy. To disarm with calmness is not just a skill. It's a superpower. It tells the world, "My peace is not up for negotiation." And when people realize they can't provoke you, they stop trying. That's when you truly step into quiet strength. Every time you react to nonsense, you pay a tax with your energy. An argument that lasts 10 minutes can steal hours of your focus afterward. A single insult can replay in your head all day, draining you of the clarity you need for what truly matters. Emotional reactivity is expensive, and the cost compounds over time. The question is, what could you build if you stopped wasting that energy? The Stoics remind us that life is short, and energy is precious. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That realization doesn't just protect your peace, it frees up resources. Energy once wasted on defending yourself can now be invested in strengthening yourself. Time once spent replaying arguments can be spent on pursuits that align with your values. For people in their 30s and 40s, this shift is vital. At this stage, responsibilities are heavier than ever: raising children, building careers, caring for aging parents, maintaining health. You don't have the luxury of leaking energy into every petty conflict. Your focus is the currency that determines your future. If you squander it on gossip, comparison, or endless defensiveness, the things that actually matter, your family, your work, your growth, are left underfunded. Imagine walking into a family dinner where tension brews. Old, you would absorb the atmosphere, argue back, and leave drained. The wiser version of you notices the tension but refuses to invest in it. You redirect that energy into listening, into patience, into modeling steadiness for your children. Instead of being another spark in the fire, you become the anchor in the storm. That's not avoidance. That's strategic investment. Or consider your career. A colleague undermines you in a meeting. Old, you reacts instantly, defending, arguing, proving. Hours later, you're still replaying it. The recentered version of you pauses, makes a mental note, and later channels that same energy into excelling at your work. Over time, it's not the argument that builds your reputation, it's the consistency of your calm excellence. Energy, like money, is finite. You can waste it on every petty expense, or you can invest it where it compounds. The choice is yours. Stoicism doesn't demand that you stop caring. It demands that you care wisely. When you withdraw energy from things that don't deserve it, you suddenly have far more to give to the things that do. And that reallocation can transform not just your inner peace, but your entire life trajectory. There comes a moment when you realize that true transformation doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It's not dramatic, not loud, and not about proving anything to the world. Instead, it feels like breathing clean air after years of fog. You notice it when someone says something that once would have ruined your day, and now it barely touches you. You notice it when a conflict begins to unfold, but you no longer feel the pull to jump in. These subtle shifts signal that you're no longer ruled by reactivity. You've begun to master it. At first, this change surprises even you. You catch yourself smiling at things that used to trigger anger. You find yourself walking away from arguments that once felt irresistible. The world around you hasn't grown kinder. People still make mistakes, criticize, or try to provoke, but the difference is inside you. The control panel others once pressed has been unplugged. What looked like detachment from the outside is actually discipline on the inside. For people in their 30s and 40s, this quiet shift can feel life-saving. The demands of adulthood often leave little space for unnecessary chaos. You've seen enough storms to know that not every battle deserves to be fought. This wisdom doesn't make you weaker, it makes you more precise. Instead of scattering your energy, you channel it where it matters most. You start living less as a reactor and more as a creator of your reality. And people notice, not because you're louder, but because your calm presence carries weight. In meetings, others begin to look to you as the steady voice. In family life, your ability to hold composure sets the tone for everyone else. In friendships, your refusal to fuel gossip or drama creates an atmosphere of respect. Quiet strength doesn't need applause. It speaks for itself. Some may misunderstand this shift. They may accuse you of being cold, detached, or uncaring. Let them. What they don't realize is that you haven't stopped caring. You've simply stopped caring about everything. You've become selective, disciplined, intentional. And that discipline is freedom. This is the paradox. When you stop giving away your energy to what doesn't matter, you have more to give to what does. The transformation is internal first, but eventually it reshapes your entire external world. And it happens so quietly, so gradually, that one day you look back and realize you didn't just survive the noise, you transcended it. One of the most damaging misconceptions about Stoicism is the idea that calmness equals indifference. People often assume that if you don't react, you must not care. If you don't argue back, you must be weak. If you don't defend yourself loudly, you must have nothing to say. But real Stoic calm is not about apathy, it's about clarity. It's the choice to protect your peace so that you can care more deeply about the right things. Imagine a parent who refuses to escalate every minor conflict with their teenager. To the child, it may look like indifference. You don't even care what I do. In reality, that parent cares so much about the long-term relationship that they won't waste energy on every small rebellion. Instead, they save their influence for the battles that truly matter. That's not neglect, that's wisdom. Or picture yourself in a heated workplace. Someone accuses you unfairly in front of others. The old you would jump to defend, raising your voice, fueling the fire. The recentered you stays calm, addresses the issue later with clarity, and keeps the meeting on track. To some, it may look like weakness, but to those with discernment, it looks like strength. the kind of strength that builds credibility over time. The Stoics had a word for this state: apatheia. It doesn't mean feeling nothing. It means refusing to let every gust of wind shake your inner tree. You still feel emotions. You still care about people. But you don't let every noise claim ownership of your mind. This distinction is crucial, because in your 30s and 40s, the weight of responsibilities means you cannot afford to scatter your energy on everything. Detachment in this sense is not withdrawal from life. It is engagement with precision. Some people will never understand this shift because their identity is tied to drama. They equate loudness with strength, reaction with relevance, and outrage with passion. But true strength is quiet. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need constant validation. It knows its own worth. When you stop reacting, you're not shutting the world out. You're choosing what to let in. And in that choice, you discover a kind of peace that is not passive but powerful. The kind of peace that allows you to show up fully present for the people and projects that actually deserve your heart. Every moment you spend reacting to trivial things is energy stolen from what truly matters. Think about how often a single argument ruins your focus for the entire day. You replay conversations in your head. You imagine what you should have said, and meanwhile, your real priorities, your health, your family, your work are neglected. Emotional reactivity doesn't just disturb peace. It diverts resources that the Stoics treated energy as sacred. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily not to waste thought on matters beyond his control. In our time, this lesson matters even more. We live in an economy designed to siphon your attention through outrage, comparison, and distraction. To invest your energy wisely is an act of rebellion. It means saying, I refuse to spend my life funding nonsense with my focus. By your 30s or 40s, this choice becomes urgent. You no longer have the endless reserves of youth. Your energy is divided between building a career, raising a family, maintaining health, and navigating responsibilities. Every ounce matters. And here lies the opportunity. The less you react to noise, the more you can invest in growth. Instead of replaying that insult, you pour into learning. Instead of proving yourself to a critic, you prove yourself by excelling quietly. This shift is not theoretical. It's practical. Imagine redirecting all the time once wasted on defensiveness into building skills that elevate your career. Imagine channeling the energy once lost to arguments into nurturing your relationships. Over years, this difference compounds. The reactive person spends decades drained by drama. The Stoic-minded person builds a life of depth, clarity, and resilience. So ask yourself, where are you leaking energy right now? Which conflicts, grudges, or comparisons are robbing you daily? And more importantly, what could you build if you reclaimed that energy? Stoicism doesn't tell you to stop caring. It tells you to care strategically, to care in a way that strengthens instead of weakens. When you learn to withdraw from meaningless battles, you're not becoming passive, you're becoming precise. And that precision, over time, reshapes your entire life. True transformation rarely arrives with applause. It doesn't need announcements or recognition. It happens in the quiet shifts inside you. One day you realize that words which once cut deeply now barely scratch the surface. Situations that used to send you spiraling now feel like small ripples on the surface of a steady lake. The world hasn't changed, you have. This kind of growth is subtle, but its impact is profound. You stop rushing to defend yourself because you no longer feel threatened. You stop replaying arguments because you no longer need validation. Even your presence changes. People begin to notice that you don't get pulled into chaos. They may not be able to explain it, but they feel it. A steadiness, a groundedness, a strength that speaks louder than any defense ever could. At midlife, this is the strength most needed. Responsibilities, pressures, and challenges don't disappear. In fact, they often multiply. But when you've cultivated this inner calm, you navigate them differently. You become the one others look to when storms rise. Not because you have all the answers, but because your calm presence creates space for clarity. In meetings, in family life, in friendships, you stop being another spark in the fire and start being the anchor. Some people won't understand this change. They may accuse you of being distant, of caring less. But you know the truth. You haven't stopped caring, you've started caring better. You've shifted from scattering your energy on every insult or distraction to investing it where it truly matters. That is not coldness. That is maturity. The Stoics would call this quiet strength the fruit of discipline. It doesn't arrive overnight. It comes from daily practice, choosing silence when you could explode, choosing clarity when you could spiral, choosing stillness when you could be baited. Each small choice builds upon the last, until one day you look back and realize you are no longer controlled by the noise around you. This is the paradox of Stoicism. From the outside, it looks like detachment. From the inside, it feels like freedom. And once you taste that freedom, there's no going back. You've learned that the calmest person in the room is often the most powerful, not because they dominate others, but because they've mastered themselves. One of the greatest misunderstandings about emotional mastery is thinking it means suppressing or denying what you feel. That is not Stoicism, that is repression, and repression always leaks out in destructive ways. The Stoics didn't ask you to stop feeling. They asked you to examine your feelings, to question them, and to choose your response wisely. Emotions are not enemies. They are signals. Anger may signal that your boundaries are being crossed. Fear may signal that growth lies ahead. Sadness may signal that something valuable has been lost. But the signal is not the same as the story. The moment you attach a narrative, "This always happens to me," or "I'll never recover from this," the emotion mutates into suffering. Stoicism teaches you to separate the raw signal from the story. Take anger as an example. Most people see it as fire, something that must be unleashed or hidden. The Stoics saw it as energy. Aristotle reminded us that anyone can get angry, but few know how to direct anger at the right person, in the right way, for the right reason. That's the discipline. Not to kill the fire, but to contain it, to use it with precision. In midlife, this perspective becomes essential. By 35 or 45, you've accumulated emotional patterns that either serve you or sabotage you. If you keep reacting blindly, you carry the weight of every old story into each new situation. But when you start treating emotions as teachers instead of tyrants, you reclaim your authority. You begin to ask, what is this feeling showing me? Is it about the present, or is it an echo from the past? The difference is life-changing. A sharp criticism no longer destroys your confidence. It becomes feedback you can choose to use or discard. A surge of fear no longer paralyzes you, it becomes an invitation to step into growth. Even grief, one of the heaviest emotions, transforms from endless despair into a recognition of what truly matters. This is emotional maturity, not reacting blindly, not suppressing, but engaging with feelings consciously. You stop living as a puppet of your moods and start living as their interpreter. And once you learn to interpret instead of react, your emotions stop controlling your life. They start guiding it. Stoicism is not mastered in theory, it is mastered in practice. Reading about calmness won't make you calm. Quoting Marcus Aurelius won't stop your triggers. What matters is applying these principles in the daily grind of ordinary life. And it begins with something deceptively simple: practicing stillness. Stillness doesn't mean withdrawing from life. It means carrying a steady center into the chaos of it. It's choosing not to let every text, every comment, every delay dictate your state of mind. Imagine your phone buzzes with a message that feels sharp or dismissive. Old you would spiral, overthinking what it meant. The trained version of you pauses, breathes, and reminds yourself, this is just words on a screen. I control the meaning. That pause is stillness in action. Or think of the workplace. Deadlines, meetings, constant pressure every day can feel like a storm. But what if you built small rituals of calm into your routine? A few minutes of mindful breathing before the day begins. A walk outside at lunch instead of scrolling through your phone. A habit of asking, what's in my control right now? Instead of drowning in what isn't. These practices are not glamorous, but they are transformative. Over time, they train your nervous system to stay anchored no matter how loud the storm gets. By midlife, cultivating stillness isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. The noise of responsibility, the speed of technology, and the weight of constant decision-making demand an anchor. Without it, you're carried by every wave of stress. With it, you become the calm eye at the center of the storm. And the irony is that the busier your life becomes, the more powerful stillness grows. The Stoics often reminded themselves that tranquility is the ultimate good. Marcus Aurelius said, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful than your own soul. That peace is not found by running away, it's built by returning again and again to the quiet space within you. Each time you practice stillness, you strengthen the muscle. Each time you refuse to be baited, you reinforce freedom. Stillness is not about escaping life. It is about living it on your terms. And once you taste it, you realize how rare and valuable it truly is in a world addicted to motion. To practice stillness daily is to declare, I refuse to live as a puppet of noise. I choose to live from my own center. One of the hardest lessons in life is realizing that not everything deserves your attention. The world is full of noise, and without discipline, you can spend decades chasing distractions that never bring you closer to peace or purpose. The Stoics knew this. They practiced ruthless clarity about what matters and what doesn't. And this practice is perhaps the greatest gift you can give yourself in adulthood. Think about your daily life. How much of your energy is wasted on opinions that don't matter, arguments that lead nowhere, or comparisons that only create envy? By your mid-30s or 40s, you've likely noticed how draining this cycle can be. The moment you begin choosing where to place your focus, life feels lighter. You no longer carry the unnecessary weight of trying to solve every problem, prove every point, or please every person. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." What he meant is simple. The moment you stop chasing approval, you gain back control. You free yourself from the endless need to explain, justify, or impress. And suddenly, there is space for the things that truly matter: your health, your loved ones, your craft, your growth. This isn't about apathy. It's about discernment. Caring about everything equally is not compassion, it's chaos. If every tone of voice, every social media comment, every perceived slight grabs your attention, then your life will be scattered in 1,000 directions. But if you train yourself to ask, "Does this deserve my energy?" you begin to filter the essential from the trivial. That filter becomes your shield in practice. This means letting go of battles that aren't yours to fight. It means ignoring provocations that have nothing to do with your purpose. It means saying no more often, not out of selfishness, but out of wisdom. Each no to nonsense is a yes to clarity. And here's the paradox. Once you stop reacting to everything, you actually start living more fully. You discover that you don't need to attend every conflict or carry every burden. You become lighter, more grounded, more available for the things that align with your values. That's not weakness, it's strength refined by wisdom. The Stoics called this living in accordance with nature, focusing on what's within your control and releasing the rest. It is the art of choosing carefully, of living with intention. And the more you practice it, the more you realize that life's richness doesn't come from doing everything. It comes from doing the right things with your whole heart. Stoicism doesn't ask you to withdraw from life. It asks you to master your response to it. The truth is, the world will never stop testing you. People will still criticize, misunderstand, and sometimes try to provoke. Circumstances will still bring stress, loss, and uncertainty. But none of these things need to own you. When you understand that your peace belongs to you and only you, you stop being a puppet of your emotions and start becoming the master of your mind. There's a quiet kind of power in this. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need recognition. It shows itself in steady actions and calm decisions, in the ability to walk through fire without being consumed by it. This is not about becoming colder. It's about becoming clearer. It's not about caring less. It's about caring better. You no longer scatter your energy on every distraction. Instead, you invest it where it creates growth, your purpose, your relationships, your health, your soul. And here's the beautiful part. When you change, the world changes around you. People who once thrived on pushing your buttons lose their grip. Situations that once stole your peace no longer have the same hold. You begin to notice how much of your suffering was self-made, how many battles were fought with shadows, how many storms were fueled by your own reactions. And as this realization settles, life feels lighter, stronger, freer. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That strength is available to you right now, not tomorrow, not when life finally becomes easier, but in this very moment when you choose to pause, to question, to redirect your focus. The decision to reclaim your peace is not dramatic. It's daily. And each small choice compounds into freedom. So the challenge is simple but profound. Practice the pause, protect your energy, and reclaim the authorship of your story. Don't let others write your script with their words or actions. Choose calm over chaos, clarity over confusion, presence over reactivity. That is how you stop being triggered, not because the world has grown kinder, but because you've grown stronger. If this message spoke to you, there's more waiting. On StoicCraft, we dive deeper into lessons that turn ancient philosophy into modern strength. Watch the next video, explore the playlist, and join this journey of building a mind that no one and nothing can control. Subscribe, share, and most importantly, practice. Because once you master yourself, you've already won.